All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Oh, hello all. It is, thank you. I know it's an extraordinary thing when you think about the fact that I was at death's door yesterday, as you know.
What?
As you know, well, if you watched, you saw you were worried, weren't you, Albert? You were worried. There was even question as to whether or not I could finish the show. Weakened by some kind of intense cold that only got worse and worse. It's been a rough time.
Oh,
Even
girl,
to be
baby
here at
girl.
this, I'm
Don't
telling you,
even
even
play.
It was crazy. I sought the advice of medical professionals. They hooked me up with fluids, with the B12, with the. There's been a lot going on. But to be here now and today,
I have a busy week.
I pulled those tubes out of my veins and I ran into the studio and I said, I must be here now.
What?
And I'm happy to be here. Yes. I'm not going to miss this show.
We're in better shape, but I don't think we're in wildly better shape.
I'm going to bring it today. Have you heard that term? I'm going to bring it? Well, I'm going to bring it.
Why are you yelling?
We have great guests today.
Are you all right?
Kim,
Yes.
I'm on a natural high.
Okay.
And I'm on a Theraflu high. And it's
I
pretty
thought
special.
maybe you had one too many salmon gummies from yesterday. I wasn't sure what was going on there.
Do like my salmon gummies. Somebody sent me and this is something I want to talk to Dr. Michael Daigneault about, who is going to be joining us, I think, next week. Somebody sent me a story this morning about the fact that the use of marijuana, cannabis, either in edible form or in smokable form, leads to some cardiac problems potentially. Seemed odd because cannabis has been around a long time and there have been all kinds of studies on it, and it was the target of government ire for so long, right? I mean, the government wanted it gone. And that's a whole other conversation as to why. But my point being, the government-funded studies couldn't find anything wrong with it. All of a sudden, we come up with a study. But the problem with the study, as I started to read, it was a news story today, as I say, and it was the researchers at UC San Francisco. It was related to vascular function. You may be able to find it, Kim.
Yeah.
They said that vascular function reduced by 42% of marijuana smokers, by 56% among edible users. They say that pot smoke, along with marijuana compound found in edibles, affects the lining of the blood vessels. They can get inflamed and plaque can build up in arteries over time. Now, here's the problem with that study. There it is. The problem with the study is that there wasn't, at least these are critics of the study, control for what specific cannabis products subjects used, or their diet, or their body mass index, or their lifestyle factors. I mean, it's like, are you kidding? So if you get a lot of people in there who have lifestyle factors or body mass indicators that would predispose them, let's say, to issues involving plaque and buildup like that, cardiovascular issues, then it's not a fair study. It's not an A-B comparison. So I'm just saying it's too early.
I think there's as the commissioner of sports, a lot of NBA players do smoke pot, and a lot of them are clearly not affected. They are the 1% of all humans, but I think a lot of them noted, and they've said in interviews that they do it. So I'm sure that factor is very important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Researchers did say, and the sample size was pretty small, only 55 people, but they did say that the participants appeared outwardly healthy.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Where are my weed
Yeah.
smokers at?
I don't know.
I have heard that the
Stay at home and
marijuana-
get baked.
Yeah, all right.
I heard that the marijuana of today is a lot different than the marijuana of the 60s in that it's more potent and
Yes,
it's stronger.
that's
So-
Albert. Please, that's not. All right. Yes, it is true. It is true. You didn't know what you were getting back in the old days, and now you know what you're getting, and it's gonna lay you out quickly. Interesting. And so you're saying, look, maybe the marijuana of today does have these ill effects potentially. No, I don't know. But,
I don't know. I'm not part of the study, which, by the way, is published as of yesterday in JAMA Cardiology. If anyone's interested in reading the peer-reviewed research.
Wow. Remember on the old radio show, every time we'd quote a medical story out of JAMA, we would play Jamming, like, and it was kind of, it was a funny, trust me, it was funny, but we can't do it here because we'll be demonetized if we play any music. Still making reefer madness lies, says man from the West 420. I mean, again, I guess that's what I was kind of saying. I don't know if it's real or not, but it sure does feel questionable. But we need more. We need more. Weed is a medicinal herb, says man from the West 420. I'm going to start calling him Dr. Man from the West 420.
I think we know how he feels about the subject.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
If you put it in your handle, you're pretty much committed to the weed. But listen, let's make a note. Albert, next week, I think Dr. Daniel will be through. We do a regular segment here called Vital Signs, and we will include this study and ask him to give us his thoughts on it. So, doctors and scientists are really not respected in America anymore. It's the new thing, right? It's conspiracy theorists and people who know little or nothing about scientific studies. Those are the ones who, if they have a podcast, then we trust them, right? But if you have a medical degree, it's like, yeah, really, yeah, but the medical degree, I mean, it's all they teach you, what they want to teach you. So, hey, today on this great program that you have happened upon, we have some stuff coming up right away that will, I think, in a way, not shock you. You'll be maybe lifted by the fact that many of these GOP senators and congresspeople who return to their districts and do these town halls or meetings, which they are being told in Washington by GOP leadership to avoid. They're being told, avoid your own constituents. I mean, imagine that. But some of them are still going through with these town halls. They're being booed. There was also a shocking admission from one of them. We'll share that with you in just a couple of moments. And at the bottom of the hour, excuse me, I have to cough.
Mm-hmm. Richard Delamater says with $5, here I am, your MTS weed smoker. Here, sir.
I love it. Thank you, Richard. Cheers. Cheers in my Mark Thompson Show mug, which I believe this one is, we could try ignoring it. Yeah. This is the, having some warm tea from Coachella Valley Coffee. They sell tea also, and spice is so delicious. Use our discount Mark T at checkout for 10% off. But I was also going to tell you that Elex Michaelson will join us bottom of the hour. Elex is a brilliant talent. He does a show called The Issue Is across California, and he discusses those things that are of particular issue in how can I volunteer for that study as Harry Magnet? Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of pod studies you can volunteer for. Plenty of stories that relate to California. I do want to ask him about the situation that California finds itself in with regard to the federal government. And if you're not in California, it still applies to you, because what's happening is the feds are taking on governors and blue states and blue state cities as well, as you know, that might find themselves on adversarial footing with the current administration, right? So if Trump doesn't like California, he's threatening to pull federal money. He's actually pulling federal money in all kinds of different ways. Even his dismantling of the CDC and the NIH affects California because a lot of that research money, scientific research money, poured into California universities. So if you're in California, that'll be of particular interest to you. But Elex also can discuss global issues. In fact, I think he's got a trip, international trip planned next week. So I'm glad that he could squeeze us in today. He'll be bottom of the hour. And then, of course, the story of the day is that the tariffs that Donald Trump had imposed, we flagged them immediately as illegal. We weren't alone. I mean, I think they were flagged as illegal by pretty much anybody who could clear-headedly look at them. They have now been officially declared illegal, and they're enjoined, that is to say, they are blocked from going into effect. Now, questions come up involving appeal of this decision. It will certainly be appealed. It is going to be appealed. It'll go up to the Supreme Court. Trump feels that his concierge Supreme Court should rule in his favor. We'll ask David Katz in hour 2, the brilliant legal analyst, former federal prosecutor, and now a defense attorney in Southern California. We'll ask David about what the chances are on appeal at SCOTUS. But what I'm also curious about is there already have been a bunch of levied tariffs. There have been a bunch of import taxes that have been paid. What happens to those? Presumably, they have to be returned. And I'm sure there'll be either a lawsuit for their return, or how might that proceed? So there's a host of issues, both legal and political. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me for the cough. Gosh,
Yeah,
I may have to take some more of that medicine. But there are a host of issues, both legal and political, that are introduced as a result of this new court ruling. So we'll talk to David Katz about that. That will be hour 2. Look at this. Rory and Nancy with love from Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. $50 in a super chat. Rory and Nancy, thank you. Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. Truly regular viewers of the show. I wish we could recognize everybody who contributes to this show. We try to recognize everyone who contributes to the show. Look at that, a $50 contribution from Romania Animal Rescue, Inc. And Romania Animal Rescue is not alone. I mean, many of you have stepped up and have supported this show and support independent media that way. And we try to include everybody's name on the end. I say try because, you know, once in a while one gets in the outfield on us, and I had a big back and forth recently. I'll share it with you maybe next week with a listener viewer who said I didn't see my name, and I thought, then I went back and I looked and I saw her name, and then I wondered what was going on. Why did she say she didn't see her name? And so I get it. There are others who contribute and they say, I don't want my name posted. I don't care about my name posted. We're more concerned with supporting the show. So wherever you fall in, or even if you're not contributing and just here, if you share the show, if you do things to support the show along those lines, that helps build the footprint of the show. And that really is the way we grow the show. So thank you. It doesn't always have to be a financial contribution, but those of you who have actually reached into your pocket to help us, wow, it's humbling, and I do appreciate it. So Romania Animal Rescue, Inc., thank you. And all of you who have stepped up in the different ways that you do, thank you for doing so.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm sorry for a little coughing and sneezing today. I am still sadly sick-ish. I'm on this Theraflu stuff, and I've got to take some more in about a half hour. So, but I did, you know, the tariff situation, we will pick up in hour 2 in a big way, and I'll mention it with Elex Michaelson coming up. His bulk tariffs, Trump's bulk tariffs have really been, they've been shut down. They've been slammed down. We knew them to be illegal at the time, and finally the courts caught up with it. Now, this is, hang on.
Egolf Twitler says it's the best taco trigger coming in from Trump Tower. Trump was asked about the whole taco thing, and he didn't like the question from this reporter that popped in with Trump, how do you feel about taco?
Yeah,
Trump
Albert, you have that. Do you have that video? Let's run a little bit of that.
What that stands for, yeah.
He was actually confronted with it. Here it is.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out. on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive. And you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation, but don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead. To me, that's a nasty
wild.
question.
With Janine Pirro, his new wing woman there over his left shoulder. Of course, 6 months ago, the country had the leading economy in the world. There was no reason to touch anything. As I think I've mentioned to David K. Johnston in conversations, I mean, that would have been my advice to him. Dude, do your high-profile stuff. Do your big theater announcements. You like to make pronouncements. Do it. I mean, be the guy. Play president, but don't touch anything. Everything is fine. The same way that you inherited a great economy from Barack Obama, you inherited the leading economy, not flawless economy. Not to mention, there were problems, people being left behind in the American economy for sure. But when you considered where we were relative to the rest of the world, it was the leading economy in the world. And Trump created a situation where, again, everyone who knows anything talks about the fact that it was a self-inflicted wound. And now we are bleeding out a bit. You see the markets all over the place, but more than the markets, you see Americans worried, anxious. Meantime, this big, beautiful bill thing is going through. And in the spirit of big, beautiful bill, there was a vote in the House, and there will be a vote in the Senate. And in the big, beautiful bill, there are things snuck in. We mentioned this the other day. Essentially the get out of jail free card for Donald Trump. So he doesn't have to respect those things that come out of the courts that relate to many of his pronouncements. So the actual wording, do we have it, Kim? The actual wording, essentially what they've slipped into, it's not all money, I guess is the point in the big, beautiful bill. There is a provision that allows the president to not be bound by a court judgment and some of these injunctions out of the federal court system. Isn't that essentially what it was? I'm looking for the actual wording here.
Yeah, I had it yesterday. We talked about it, and it has to do with being able to pay for it. If you want the judge to be able to mount an injunction against something that the president does, you have to be able to put up the money for that to happen.
You have to be able to put up the money to sue the federal government to beat back essentially what would be a presidential edict. I'll get it for you here in a second. And I say I'll get it for you here in a second because I want you to watch as this is a congressperson. I believe it's looking.
Flood.
This is right. Mike Flood from Nebraska. He says that he didn't know that this provision was in this bill. Here is Mike Flood
voted for it.
He voted for it. Right.
He didn't know what was in it, and he just willy-nilly voted for it.
So he admits to his constituents that he wasn't familiar with this part of this massive tax and spending legislation that he voted. It was a big town hall meeting in Seward. And of course, this part of the bill is aimed at preventing the federal courts from blocking the power grabs by the Trump administration. That's kind of what I was saying. So he's saying, gosh, I don't agree with that. I didn't see that before I voted for it. Here's what it looked like.
This provision was unknown to me when I voted for the bill.
Okay, next question. Next question.
I am not going to hide
Next
the truth.
question.
This provision was unknown to me when I voted for that bill. And when I found out that provision was in the bill, I immediately reached out to my Senate counterparts and told them of my concern.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, it really is it's a startling admission from a U.S. legislator that you were unaware of a part of the bill that's critical and that you voted for it. I mean, this isn't, this is after the fact. The bill has moved on. You have no control. I'll talk to my Senate counterparts. Yeah, I'm sure you'll get right on that.
I don't think his constituents like that.
And this shout down that he endured doesn't exist by itself. That's Mike Flood in Nebraska. Meanwhile, there was booing at a town hall in Iowa. This is Ashley Hinson. She's the congresswoman out of Iowa, and she was praising this big, beautiful bill and the efficiency of it. And her constituents were taking none of it. Here's a little bit.
I was also proud to vote for President Trump's one big, beautiful bill, a generational investment to secure our borders permanently. Again, this bill provides continued tax relief for working Americans. I can't believe you would boo tax relief for working Americans and return America to prosperity. This bill is promises made, promises kept in action. Iowans overwhelmingly voted for President Trump's America First agenda, ending illegal immigration, preventing dangerous criminals and drugs from entering our communities, cutting wasteful spending, and unleashing American energy. That's what this bill does. My philosophy has always been that it is your money, it is not the government's money. And I will keep fighting to protect American families over illegal immigrants. From the border security perspective, it will help to secure our border permanently by funding the largest deportation effort in history and disincentivizing illegal immigration. We are going to be providing funding in this bill for at least 1 million annual removals. And by giving our Border Patrol agents the strategic advantage that they need, I think it sends a very clear message to the cartels, the traffickers, the murderers, any other illegal alien criminals that they have no place in the United States and they need to go back to their home country or go to jail. At a recent chamber event that I was at in Lynn County, I received overwhelmingly positive feedback about the work that DOJ is doing. And my whole philosophy and the intent behind DOJ is that we absolutely need to be cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And we can sustain key programs and investments that Iowans and Americans care about if we do that. And no one has sought to tackle this difficult task head on and see it through until we had President Trump in office.
Well, I mean, you hear how she adheres to the talking points and keeps on moving. And you see how she is minted almost out of the GOP mold, young, attractive, and stays on script, hits those bullet points, hits those talking points, waste, fraud, and abuse, illegal immigration, murderers, all of the stuff that he hits, they echo chamber into all of their constituencies, and that's what was happening there. But note, when she gets to Doge, they're not buying it anymore. Yeah. They're not buying the waste, fraud, and abuse Doge thing anymore. And the reality is the street is starting to turn. Now, again, the base constituency of support, that 35 to even 40%, that appears to be immovable. Particularly the way we've siloed our information and we've siloed, even the echo chambers that we live in. I'm halting because I'm thinking on some level, there's a show like this one that's on the other side, right? That the right does. There are plenty of those, and so you end up with people not receiving any facts anymore. They're receiving spin, and so she hits her talking points. But increasingly, the constituents that she deals with are dependent on government programs. So Donald Trump's plan, and this is the Project 2025 plan, and they've executed it, at incredible speed in this first few months is to dismantle government, to make this government dysfunctional. And in so doing, you'll become frustrated with government and you'll want to privatize things, because that is the plan, to privatize everything. Everything from Social Security to Medicare to the military, it will all be privatized. That is the idea, that private industry can handle things better than government. And you know what? That's just not true. I mean, it's a great thing to sort of think about and think, yeah, because they have a profit motive, so they're going to handle things better. No. Have you seen what private equity does? It strips out companies and sells them for parts. Have you called the cable company? Have you called DirecTV or whatever? Have you tried to reach any of these corporations that you have regular interactions with? You know, you'll end up on hold, you end up in prompts, you end up in... Government actually is more responsive. Not perfect. But look at the agencies that they went after, and you'll realize, wow, they went after some of the most efficient agencies in Washington. USAID has almost no waste, fraud, and abuse. That was the first agency they went after. Social Security also has great efficiency. So the idea that there is fraud in these agencies that has to be weeded out, I mean, it's a laudable goal, but it's not done by on day one having 60 of your 18 to 26-year-old pals with computers go in and start scraping the U.S. information data systems for private information that is then used in we don't know what kind of ways by this administration and by this man you're seeing, Elon Musk, and then firing thousands and thousands and thousands of people without regard for what they do or how efficient they are. So this wasn't an elimination of waste, fraud, and abuse. And back to the point, these people in these constituencies in Nebraska and in Iowa, they are starting to realize these things. And that's why that meeting that they have, these various GOP leaders go back and they get blowback from their constituents. They mentioned Doge, and they got booed like crazy.
Boo City, but they mentioned immigrants and the mass deportations, and the crowd cheered.
Yes, and immigration is still something that polls very well. It's no wonder even Trump hit it hard when they were confronting him in the Oval Office with the taco remark. He defaults to immigration. He knows that does land well with the American people. But as I've mentioned to you before, the mass deportations of violent criminals, that's not what's happening, right? You saw just the other day, I mean, this literally happened the last 24 hours, that illegal immigrants, that is to say people who are not here legally, they still go and they register at various locations around the country. And ICE is actually, and so that already tells you they're not violent criminals. They're going to register so that they can be put on a list for, these are people who've sought asylum and this kind of thing, so that their case can eventually be heard.
Sure.
Well, they were scooped up with their kids. I mean, these are horribly dramatic, heartbreaking scenes, and they're arrested. I mean, they're thrown down on the ground and arrested. It's really a pretty gruesome kind of thing. And these are high-profile arrests to send a message. It's the same reason they brought Dr. Phil in. It's the same reason they contact local news, because they're trying to play the theater of immigration. Because the reality is they can't scoop up millions of people and deport them. And so the theater of immigration is what you're seeing from this administration. So the cruelty is the idea, because it's very on brand for this crew. But the reality is something quite different. So if you go to agricultural fields and slaughterhouses and you start arresting and deporting those immigrants, well, those aren't the immigrants you said you were going to deport. You said you were going to start with violent criminals. Still, though, to Kim's point, immigration polls well. It lands well. Illegal immigration lands well with Americans. And so it's a net winner still politically. But the reality is something different than what was promised. Luis, thank you. Thanks, Doge, for saving cash for vital services like North
Korea's tank parade on Trump's birthday.
Oh, yeah, right.
Should we slash FEMA to throw in jet flyovers? Hashtag idiots.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm sure there will be jet flyovers for that military parade. It's what can I say, Louise? Thank you. Yeah, exactly. It's very North Korea. You hit it. It's North Korea. It's Russia. A very Soviet Union. It's very old school Eastern Bloc to have a military parade for your birthday. I mean, it's I don't know, and it's really off brand for America, but well, for the old America, the new America, it's
Not anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
all right, thank you all for joining us today, and I have a special guest. It's been too long since we visited with this guy. He does a show called The Issue Is. Politics across California and beyond. His access is remarkable. I mean, he's talked to leaders, political leaders, thought leaders around the world and through California. He works regularly at my old television station, where I'm sure there's some statue erected, Kim, to memorialize the great work that I did for so long there. But now he joins us. He's slumming just to come through and hang out with me. How about it for Elex Michaelson? Elex.
Mark, there is a statue, but because you were the dancing weatherman, it actually moves.
That would have been great. The kids would have come from miles around to see that. They should have thought of that.
Dancing Santa that you get during Christmas.
Yes.
There's the dancing weatherman right out front the building.
Oh my God! This is why they should pay more attention to you. That is a brilliant idea. I love it.
One of the many reasons they should pay more.
Yes, exactly. One of the many reasons they should pay more attention to you.
Yeah.
All right, you're steeped in politics. You have great access to people like Gavin Newsom and others who are critical to California's future politically and legislatively. I want to ask you first about, and I'll get to the tariffs and what's happened in the last 24 hours. But I do want to ask you about California's relationship to Washington now and how that's changed and how Donald Trump's general disposition toward California might affect our future. Can you just speak about that?
Well, the answer is actually complicated because it depends on the issue. So you look at like the wildfires, and everybody across the board, from Karen Bass to Gavin Newsom to Catherine Barger, the county supervisor, everybody has gone on the air with me and privately complimented President Trump and complimented the work of the Army Corps of Engineers in really being there, in not putting up roadblocks, and in fact, moving ahead of schedule when it comes to the debris clearance. So far, the Trump administration has not done anything to stop the federal payments to California. They have not gotten in the way. The big question will be the next round, where Newsom is asking for $40 billion from Congress. Are they going to get that money? But I do have indications from both Republicans and Democrats in Congress that think that they will get that money eventually, and that Trump will eventually go along with that. So on that front, which is an important front for those of us that have gone through the wildfire situation, things are good. Then there are other situations where it's obviously horrible, right? And then you see some of it is theater, right? The Republicans like this issue of trans athletes in sports, which affects, this many people. It's like a few people, but there is a one particular athlete at the state finals in California this week, and they've made this a big national story, and it is upsetting for girls in sports, and it is an issue, by the way, that a lot of Democrats are very uncomfortable with, and Newsom has expressed discomfort with, and President Trump is threatening to pull all federal funding from California, which I'm not quite sure how that would work or what exactly that means, and wanted to get on the phone with Gavin Newsom over it, and said, "I'm going to call you, Governor," and somehow the governor didn't pick up. So
that falls into the category of a winning political issue for Trump, he feels. And so that might play into what you're saying, though, is the theater of it, stomp and scream, but will anything really happen?
Right. And there's plenty of people that have girls that are competing in youth sports that think that this issue is unfair. I think the governor is one of them. I mean, he's got girls competing in youth sports, and he goes to practices and games on the weekends, and that's a lot of what he does. And so, I mean, I think this issue is something that he's thought of and other people have thought of. But and the solution that they came up to for this particular match doesn't really make sense broader. I mean, if you're dealing with track and field and the long jump, you're really competing against yourself. So it's a little easier to give medals to different people. But if you're like playing basketball or water polo or, tennis or something else, that doesn't work So I think that issue still has to be settled. But in terms of the big issues that are really affecting the state, that's not the issue that is affecting the state the most. The issue that could affect the world the most is the tariffs, right? And California was the first state in the country to sue over this issue of tariffs, making an argument. And I talked to the governor and I talked to the attorney general at the time, laying out this argument of why they thought that this law from 1977 was being misused by the Trump administration. And to the credit of the governor and the attorney general, their exact rationale is what the court sided with. I mean, if you read the ruling from yesterday, it sounds almost exactly like Rob Bonta's brief for California. And so the governor and the attorney general both taking victory laps today.
Yeah, it seemed at the time as though there were legal issues at minimum, and economic issues, would seem indisputable given what the markets did and given what you heard from everyone who had any kind of history in economics. I mean, from professors to those on Wall Street, as I say. But as you've suggested, the legal side of this seems to be indisputable. I mean, the three judges in this decision.
Well, the Trump administration wouldn't see it that way.
Well, I'm saying
they're disputing it.
But a Trump judge was among those who made this decision. So you Trump judge, Reagan judge, and
second court today that kind of doubled up on it. I mean, ultimately, like many things, it'll go likely before the Supreme Court. We'll see if the Supreme Court takes the case. They don't have to take every case. But if they do weigh in, it would be really interesting, and it really would be something. I mean, it would be a true moment in history if this Trump, Supreme Court with three of his justices slapped him down on tariffs, his big signature economic issue, the issue that Trump has been talking about for decades, the kind of only thing that seems to be a core belief of his. From before he was running for president. He was talking about this in the 80s on talk shows. That really would be a huge moment in history. Or it's possible that the Supreme Court could say, no, we disagree with this lower court. Mr. President, you've got this power. Go ahead.
Let me ask you about the politics of the tariffs, this tariff issue. We were talking before about how the immigration issue continues to be a net winner for him. That is to say, there's a lot of popular support. I mean, it may land differently with different people. That is to say, what the immigration problem is. And you just visited the trans question, which I think also politically can be calculated as a winner for him, or at least a
big winner for him.
Yeah.
I mean, they put hundreds of millions of dollars in the campaign onto that issue. They think it's one of their top issues.
Right. And that spot still, I thought, was the best spot, that 30-second spot, right? Your tax money for illegal immigrants to get sex change operations, et cetera.
She's for they, them, he's for you.
Yeah. I mean, wow.
It's a good line.
And it is a good line. It was a brilliant spot. I mean, diabolical almost. I thought it was bad that bad might even understate it, that the Democrats and Harris didn't punch back with their own 30-second spot. But they didn't, and that's water under the bridge. But I'm wondering about the tariffs politically, because you're so good with the politics. How do those land? It feels to me as though the anxieties expressed by economists, as I've said, are now being reflected by those who aren't really connected to the economy except for the fact that we go out and buy stuff. But we've heard about things getting more expensive. And so I feel as though it's filtering down, the questions about the tariffs. And I feel like the more talk about tariffs, it may actually have a stink about it that politically doesn't play for him.
The interesting part of this court decision is it could be the best thing that ever happened to him politically.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? It gives him an out where he can say, I fought, screw the fake courts and the fake judges and their ruling, and I believe in this, but it is what it is. And he made his statement, but he doesn't have to deal with the repercussions of it.
Yeah. In other words, you're saying the economy survives because the tariffs don't go through. Is that kind of what you're saying?
And
yeah.
So
okay.
He feels like he looks strong because he made his point, but he doesn't have to deal with, with them. I mean, what we haven't really seen, we haven't seen the full implementation of the tariffs, and we haven't really seen the huge price hikes or the huge supply issues yet, because that takes a little while because of the way that stores stock the shelves and all the rest of that. But if all of a sudden you're going back to school shopping and there's no backpacks for the kids, if at Christmas there really are only $2 or whatever, whatever we talked about there, and there isn't enough stuff for people, I think that breaks through. I mean, most people are not following politics day to day, but they do, check the receipt for when they buy stuff. I mean, most people, one of the key reasons they went to Trump was because they were pissed off about inflation. They were pissed off about Joe Biden's age, and that they thought that Trump was a business guy. And they thought that he would be more vigorous. I mean, that's like kind of what and they didn't like the immigration stuff. Like it's pretty basic, really. And so if he's kind of whiffing on that, and everybody's paying more money, and he looks kind of crazy doing it and looks kind of old and out of it himself in the process. And by the way, he's going too far on the immigration stuff. And there's stories like we did yesterday on the news of a 4-year-old girl who's got this, life-saving medication at Children's Hospital, and they're trying to deport her. Those stories, I think, ultimately start to seep through to some people too.
CC Ryder saying Fox News has promoted the immigration border lie for over 10 years. I think Fox News, it's / right-wing media, the Fox News channel is what she's talking about, has promoted the immigration border lie for over 10 years. And unfortunately, mainstream media then polled on it. No one called out the lies. So the issue is embedded in American minds as fact. I mean, it's interesting. Has the immigration question and the immigration issue been over amplified in your judgment, so it's like weighing in politically as a heavyweight, that or hey, it is what it is? I mean, the concerns of Americans are the concerns of Americans.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is there some of that phenomenon, of course, and when something gets put in front of you every day and every day and every day, but it would be a lie to say that there wasn't a lot more people coming across the border 2 years ago than there are now. I mean, there just were. And whether it was Fox News out there and reporting on it, or other people reporting on it, or if you just had a camera or a drone overhead, like there's been a dramatic change in the amount of people that are coming. And so I don't know where, we all live in echo chambers. And so some people may not see that information, but there has been a change there. And most Americans, overwhelmingly, Republicans and Democrats, like the idea that there's been a crackdown in terms of people randomly coming over the border without any sort of documentation or checking in, and what happens with that. Now, there's a big debate in terms of what do we do with the people that are already here. And there's a big debate in terms of if they should be removed, and who should be removed, and how they should be removed, and what the process of that. But overwhelmingly, the polling is pretty strong that most people do not like the concept of an open border. So I would counter that as framing as a lie, but each their own. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you've sort of expressed the multifaceted nature of the immigration problem. There's the border stands as its own issue apart from the immigration issue that exists with labor in America. I mean, all the many laborers through that support American agriculture, that support restaurants, sanitation work, all of these things that are socio-janitorial systems that are associated with the fact that they don't speak the language, whatever it might be. There's an underground economy that is supporting America, and to flush all of that is really something that you will hear conflicting opinions about. While, as you say, the border question is you'll see far fewer conflicting opinions on that.
And it's not such an underground economy. I mean, in California, 17% of the state of 40 million people are undocumented immigrants. That's a crazy number. Yeah. And so much of our economy, and we talk about the fires. I mean, what's the construction trade? Most of those people are not here legally that are going to be building these homes. By the way, where do you get the materials for this stuff? Most of that comes from Canada, which is supposed to be tariffed now. I mean, like, let's think about what our actual problems are and spend some time solving those problems. I mean, this idea that we're going to kick out a bunch of our foreign students, the best performing students, the smartest people that come into this country that could potentially solve cancer and solve some of our most vexing problems just because we feel like being racist towards foreigners, like that doesn't make any sense in terms of a policy decision. And it seems like these things are being done, you know, with these ideological bents that are not really, I mean, if you're really a business guy, right, which is what Trump says that he is, why are you not thinking in terms of what do we need for business? What kind of employees do we need? I mean, I guarantee you every person that's ever worked at Mar-a-Lago or some of these other places are probably not all 100% legal immigrants.
Well,
Right?
there was a big piece done on just that fact that there's a huge number of staff at Mar-a-Lago that fall into that category, yes. Hey, last thing with you, I wanted to ask just politically, you're so kind to spend some time with us. Politically, I see the corruption issue of the Trump administration as a real problem. Now, you can, I'm not asking you to take a side on this, but you
After
can
I just took a giant opinion.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I thought I was quite pleasantly surprised. But look, the what I consider open corruption, where so much money is pouring into Trump coffers, where you see what's happened in Vietnam as they're in the middle of a trade negotiation, and they A, make a bunch of trade concessions, and B, say, we're going to green light the Trump resort here. In fact, we're going to remove all of these Vietnamese citizens and residents from this area to allow this golf course to be built in this area. That same plan is being played out in the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, et cetera, with so many monies out in the open. And Mike Johnson, in fact, says, well, it's out in the open. That's why we don't have the issue with the Trump administration that we did with the Bidens, which is just the oddest, twisted rationale. Now, I'm asking you politically, do you think, is it your sense that Americans are bothered by this, or are they in their own world and it doesn't land with them?
I don't think on a gut level that most Americans are bothered by it, which is, I know, kind of a crazy thing to say. I think most Americans assume that the whole system is corrupt and kind of effed up. And I think that's baked into it. I don't think anybody, even Trump's supporters, thinks that he's like, you know, an angel. I mean, some people I guess do, but I mean, I think they kind of like that he's a little sleazy, but he's there kind of sleazy and fighting for them. That's how they interpret it. And I think that they think the whole system's rigged. And then you see, you know, Biden pardoning his son and pardoning his family, and it all gets sort of mixed into, oh, they're all just this. And so I think that what really matters to people is how does it affect me, which is why the tariff thing politically, potentially, could be the most important thing if it really goes through, and it may not go through because of all this lawsuit stuff. If my prices start going up that I see every day when I've been used to buying this and now it costs this, I think that hits people. That's why something like gas prices is such a big thing, because you literally see it flashing in front of you when you drive every day. And so I think that is what matters to people. And unfortunately, I don't think it's a good thing, but I have not seen a lot of evidence that the corruption thing really matters. I mean, it is crazy to imagine that if Barack Obama or Joe Biden accepted a plane from Qatar for their use as president, and then no other president gets to use it, and then it goes to their library afterwards, that nobody on the right would say anything about that. Right? I mean, like, that's absurd. And yet the Republican Party is just like, yeah, that's cool. Go ahead. You know? And so, but I think they don't feel any political need to even performatively pretend to be outraged, because I think it's baked in. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think it even goes to the pardons. You know, the pardons outrage me. You know, these are people who were convicted by juries. Right. And they defrauded banks, and they defrauded Americans tens of millions of dollars.
Officers on January 6th.
Thank you. I mean, the reconstitution of that, the recharacterization of January 6th is loathsome and grotesque. But yeah, all of these things, sadly, somehow in the new America have been digested in a way that Americans just don't find the outrage with it. And I mean, I think people who watch this show have the frustration, and I think there are others as well. But it's not getting through to his block. His block, I think you're right. They're immovable until you start messing with, and that's one of the things that they are doing, Medicare, government programs that they need, Social Security. I mean, the word about Social Security starts to get to those Social Security recipients pretty quickly. And even if it doesn't happen, they start to feel the threat. And so I think these are the things that matter. I think, sadly, you're right on so many of these things. It doesn't land politically. So,
yeah, and and especially the young people, like young males who are coming into think about their whole lifetime. I mean, the amount of political corruption that they've noticed in the last, 10 years or even 5 years of seeing everything, they're so cynical to begin with. I mean, you think about young people as idealistic, but the new generation and all the social media and everything that's been in their face, they think about the world in a different way too.
Well, that's so interesting that you say this, because you're so aware of what's happening politically and young people coming up politically, and they have their own YouTube channels and TikTok followings and all the rest. And what there's a premium on increasingly politically, I think, is being able to come across with bold statements, being able to build following, not coming up with strategic ways in which we can change policy, ways in which we can make life better, but sort of attack strategies. Attack really is the thing that wins in social media. And so it wins politically because the social media following spills over to a political following. That's what concerns me. So you add that to the corruption that they grow up with, and you see that politics becomes something where stuff doesn't get done really for the people. It becomes something else, a power grab, I think, essentially. It's really, I'm really downcast about it,
Right. And it's not a coincidence that Trump keeps showing up at UFC matches, right? This idea of like theatrical combat.
Sure. No, that's
there's
it.
a premium on that. And that, is winning. And so the kind of personality that wins in that environment is a loud, aggressive asshole. Because that gets clicks. And what doesn't win in that environment, nuanced, empathetic, sensitive person who's looking for consensus, right? And we probably need a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly seems to be what people call for, but what wins the day continues to be, as you say, the assholery of the whole conversation.
And the question is, as the Democratic Party looks to rebuild, do they sort of acknowledge that and try to figure out a way to make that work within their brand without trying to be Republicans, because that never really works. But to sort of bury your head and pretend like that's not happening also seems to be a pretty dumb strategy that's really not working right now.
Now I'm way into overtime with you, longer than I thought I'd keep you, but just because your last response does sort of prompt this question. Joe Biden, you could see as and we're just looking at top of ticket people here, and I know that, the business of politics is way more than that, but just looking at sort of presidential candidates and leaders of the party, even if they're not actually presidential candidates. Joe Biden was an institutionalist. He was a middle of the road kind of guy. If you go back to Obama, you could see him as a more palatable version of the Democrats. I mean, he didn't come across as a radical leftist, if you will. I mean, for example, AOC might be seen as left of Obama, just in terms of the brand, right? And so when you look at at the field, I mean, who in the party seems to be capable of pulling together a big enough constituency to be a leader of the party now? Because the last leaders I've seen on tour, Bernie Sanders and AOC, are probably too left to go all the way and really bring the party together.
Well, and the party seemed to go out of its way to make sure that Bernie Sanders was not the nominee twice, too.
Oh, you're not kidding. Yeah.
And so that may be an approach again if AOC has her own run at this thing. I don't think we have the answer to that yet. I don't think we know. One of the things that James Carville said to me once is when I asked him sort of a similar question, and he said, it's one thing to look at the horses in the stable, but you got to see them get out there on the track and run. And sometimes when they're running, they look a little different than they do in the barn. And so
you could have said that about Kamala Harris, couldn't you?
Well, he did.
Yeah, right.
He called her a 7-string quarterback.
Yeah.
But so that's part of the thing. So what does Gavin Newsom look like as a nominee? or as a candidate? What does Gretchen Whitmer look like? What does Pete Buttigieg look like, who's saying some of the most interesting things, but is he going to be seen as, sort of alpha enough? What about, does Wes Moore get into the race? What is Josh Shapiro doing a cheap Obama impression, or is he like this brilliant centrist who can bring people together? Like, what are they actually like when they start getting attacks and having reporters around them all the time, and the social media stuff and everything? And that's where there's value of a campaign. That's where there's value for a primary. That's the, part of the point of original sin, which I just read and have Alex Thompson on our show this week, that the Democrats didn't get to do that. And Kamala Harris would have been a stronger nominee if she went through that process. And if after all of that, she was seen as the strongest person, she would have been stronger. But instead, the Democrats haven't had a really, really competitive, truly open, truly introspective primary since 2008, right? Obama versus Hillary. And by the way, that made Barack Obama stronger. He was a stronger nominee at the end of that.
Sure.
And so I think it's time for the Democrats to let everybody do their thing and see who comes out of it.
It's a wild time on the Democratic side, because even as the Republicans seem to shoot themselves in the foot in so many ways, Donald Trump, with these the self-inflicted wounds associated with the tariffs, as you suggest, he might have been rescued by the courts because the tariffs were such an abomination of an idea. But the Democrats poll worse than the Republicans, despite all of the self-inflicted wounds. So the future is in doubt. Look, I'll let you go, but I do want to mention the issue which is your regular show seen across California on all the California stations in all the different markets where you can check it out. And I think you're on a big road trip to Austria, or where are you going? You're going.
That is true. Yes, I don't think I've said this publicly, but I'll break it here. So we're going next week to Austria. Arnold Schwarzenegger is doing the Schwarzenegger Global Climate Conference in Vienna, Austria.
I love it.
Together leaders from around the world. He's going to be on stage with Tony Blair. There's a bunch of other folks. They asked me to speak in part about the experience of covering the wildfires here and how the U.S. media handles some of these climate issues. I'm going to be on stage with, I think, a reporter from the BBC and somebody maybe from Austria, and sort of having a global conversation about some of these climate issues. And we're going to be doing a special with Arnold Schwarzenegger from there. So check out my reporting on social media and on the issue is and all the rest of it in the weeks ahead.
That is terrific. It's a weird thing to say, but I feel as though America now is the climate outlaw. More than any other nation on earth, perhaps.
It'll be really fascinating to hear the way the rest of the world thinks about America in this moment, firsthand from people.
It's truly it's truly depressing. I mean, I see it as it's the existential issue. I love that you're doing it, and
I'll have to report back to you.
I was going to say, please make time for us. So thank you, Alex. You're so generous. Thank you, Elex Michaelson. Everybody, thanks my friend. Yeah, safe travel. Safe travel.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at? Stay at home and get baked.
Right on. Good stuff. He is so good. Shout out to our Patreon and PayPal supporters. Love that you are with us and that you support us regularly. Really, really cool. I'm a grateful host for all the people from our audience that swoop in to support us. Patreon and PayPal, the links can be found underneath all our videos. There are hot links. You just click on it, and Patreon and PayPal is a great way to support the show on an ongoing basis. So rock it out, I mean,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is special. Now, Kim, I have time for your news before David Katz. I'd like to get caught up on sort of the very latest, and then we'll get a fix with David Katz. By the way, we found that piece of the legislation that was snuck into this big, beautiful bill. No court of the United States may enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given. It reads legalese, but essentially, judges may only issue preliminary injunctions or temporary restraining orders if litigants provide a security bond. This is so if the president and the administration, they have one of their edicts and a policy that's about to go into effect. If you want to get an injunction or a temporary restraining order, you have to provide a security bond as a litigant. You have to put up money. And so that puts tremendous pressure on you to have the money to do that. And so that's a way that the government can gain additional leverage because they go, hey, it's the law. You don't have the money, then you can't go to court on this at all. And so that's snuck into this big, beautiful bill. And that is, again, one of the things that various legislators, I think the dude from Iowa or Nebraska, was it? Mike Flood, who said, I didn't even know that part was in there, man. Gosh, I'm not for that. I'm going to tell my Senate colleagues that they should try to take that part out. I literally didn't know it was in there. Okay? You voted for it. Just saying. Kim's News and David Katz. And we break down the tariff ruling. We'll also get Katzadamus on what will happen at the SCOTUS level. Smash the like button. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The Trump administration is getting a no-go from the courts over the presidential tariffs. The U.S. Court of International Trade halted these tariffs, ruling that an emergency law does not give Trump authority to impose sweeping tariffs. Today, a U.S. district judge upheld the ruling after the Justice Department appealed. DOJ says it will go all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary on this one. We'll talk more about this to David Katz in just a few moments. A White House ban on international students at Harvard is being halted by a federal judge as well. The Obama-appointed judge says she wants to maintain status quo by allowing the Ivy League school to continue hosting international students on visas. Comes as the administration launched a number of punitive measures against Harvard for what it says is an atmosphere of anti-Semitism. President Trump is pardoning hip-hop superstar NBA YoungBoy following fraud charges. Trump signed pardons for a variety of people this week, including former New York Representative Michael Grimm, Todd and Julie Chrisley, and the popular rapper. A White House official also announced that the president signed off on a commutation of Larry Hoover's sentence of 6 life terms in prison. So he's busy on the pardon desk over there. The White House says DOJ's mission to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from government spending will continue following Elon Musk's departure. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said many DOJ employees are now political appointees and government appointees and intend to stay on. Musk began offboarding as a special government employee on Wednesday. He's helped lead the Department of Government Efficiency since it was established in January. As a special government employee, Musk was allowed to work for the administration for 130 days in a calendar year. That is up. He is now out. Legal teams for the United States and Qatari governments are still working to finalize the details involved in the gifting of this luxury jet. Doha plans to transfer a luxury Boeing 747-8 jet for President Trump to use as Air Force One. One White House official says the deal hasn't quite been finalized. Comes more than a week after the Pentagon said it had taken physical possession of this aircraft. Officials familiar with the matter telling the Washington Post, Qatar wants a memorandum of understanding between the two countries to make clear that the plane's handover was initiated by the Trump administration and that Doha is not responsible for any future transfers of the 747-8's ownership.
Wow, they really, that's like the terms and conditions they wanted to read.
They do. What that's interesting that it was initiated by the Trump administration.
No.
Wasn't Trump saying, they just said, Mr. President, we want to give you this great big
if somebody
plane.
gives you a big jet, you're supposed to say no. They give you this $400 million jet, you're supposed to say no. I don't think so.
That's not what happened at all.
No, that's not.
No, we asked for the jet. We collectively.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, we
Come
collectively,
on.
the taxpayers, are going to be responsible for stripping it down and getting it up to whatever code has to be reached, and then he's taking it with him on the way out.
Speaking of airlines,
But think of all the
JetBlue.
classified documents that he can fly in that jet. I mean, that's if he leaves office at all.
Probably has quite a big bathroom. I bet he could put a lot of documents back there. Yeah.
Good point.
JetBlue and United Airlines are teaming up to give members of their loyalty programs more chances to earn perks marks. There you go. The airlines announced a new partnership called Blue Sky on Thursday. The carrier said it will give customers new opportunities to earn and use mileage plus miles and True Blue points across both airlines. So it's a point merger, you could say. Yeah.
It's JetBlue and who?
That is JetBlue and United.
Yeah, the
Blue
crowd likes
Sky.
United.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
right. In the state of California, a man has died after his daughter's driving lesson in Southern California. I don't know if you saw this story, but Orange County Sheriff's officials say 64-year-old James Politsoki was killed this week while riding as a passenger in a car driven by his teenage daughter in Laguna Beach. Deputies say the vehicle crashed through a fence in a parking lot of a grocery store and went down an embankment. It flipped over. The man's 15-year-old daughter, who did have a driver's permit, was behind the wheel. She sustained significant injuries as well. It was a sad turn for that driving.
It was
lesson.
wild. I saw the the aftermath of the car at the base of this canyon or whatever it was, as you say, that embankment.
Right.
It's crazy. I mean, wow. I don't know. The whole idea of an adult in the car is that, he grabs the wheel or whatever it is. I don't know what specifics led to that issue, but
if you push the gas instead of the brake, and it
Yeah,
just
you're
so
right.
happened this parking lot had one area where you could go over the lip and down a steep ravine, and no amount of grabbing the wheel is going to help that, right?
Jeez.
Governor Gavin Newsom considering ending a program to increase juror pay in the state. Newsom's proposal, the latest in his work to address the state's multi-billion-dollar budget deficit, the jury duty pilot program paid jurors $100 a day in 7 counties across the state. The program was launched through legislation signed by the governor 3 years ago to raise the daily pay from $15 a day to $100 to create a more representative jury pool. Cutting this program would save about $27.5 million in the state's budget. Been a bad week for whale deaths in the San Francisco Bay Area. The California Academy of Sciences says 5 gray whales have died in the Bay Area, including in the waters off Alcatraz and Point Bonita in Marin County. The cause of these deaths not announced yet, but officials say the number of whale deaths in the region is now over a dozen this year alone. Investigations into each death to see if there are any links are ongoing.
A lot of these are ship strikes.
Ship strikes, sometimes,
So
yeah.
brutal. Yeah, it's such a
Also-
heavily trafficked area in San Francisco Bay.
They say that it also could be some type of malnourishment as well.
I see. Yeah.
In Oakland, they don't like the speed bumps, and if they don't like it, they take it out. The battle between the city of Oakland and local residents of one neighborhood over speeding vehicles continues. City crews have removed speed bumps put in by residents in the San Antonio neighborhood months after similar tire barriers were torn down. Residents are furious. They say, listen, we are tired of speeding cars and sideshows causing real safety issues in the neighborhood. City transportation officials say they're sympathetic to the issue, but that residents can't be taking the law into their own hands and putting down their own speed bumps in public streets. So can't do that.
I mean, we all know how frustrated you get, though. At some point, you start doing things like painting the curb, putting in your own speed bumps. Yeah.
Put the sign that says drive like your kids live here. That one's okay.
Yeah,
Speed bumps in the road, not so much. No. Google is becoming Stellantis' new in-car software partner. Google's Android system replaces Amazon's software partnership that was never really realized. Stellantis wants to bring a number of connected products to the vehicles in an effort to generate more than $22 billion annually from software. NVIDIA is taking a projected $8 billion hit to its bottom line in the first quarter of fiscal 2026. It's in part due to new U.S. government licensing requirements to sell AI chips to China. The new requirement preventing the shipment of nearly $3 billion worth of chips in the first quarter of fiscal 2025. In spite of that financial hit, NVIDIA announced revenue is up 12% from the previous quarter and up, get this, 69% from just a year ago.
Wow.
Wow. Meta is looking to open more brick and mortar retail stores as it expands investments into wearable technology. You have your Google goggles, your
sure.
Meta goggles. Yeah. The company wants to increase sales of items like its Ray-Ban Meta glasses and Quest VR headsets. Bloomberg reports in February that Meta hired the former CEO of The Real as its retail vice president. So watch for a Meta store to open near you. And Dream Park, the creator of the world's largest downloadable mixed reality theme park, says it has raised more than $1 million to expand its business. The co-founder says the idea is to build the world's largest theme park, one that exists everywhere and is accessible to everyone. The technology transforms the physical locations into immersive mixed reality environments. You can go to a theme park when you get your Quest VR headset, and there you go. Off you go and run it.
You don't need your Quest VR headset you don't need your theme park once you have the headset.
I don't know. It's interesting.
You don't actually need a theme park.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, hey. Okay.
I'm looking at the chat, which I'll deal with in a second. Go ahead. Yes.
The Trump administration is canceling a contract with Moderna meant to help the company develop vaccines fighting the pandemic flu viruses.
I saw it's like a $600 million contract, right?
Yeah, the Biden administration awarded the company $176 million, then an additional $590 million as bird flu spread among livestock and occasional farm workers. But a Health and Human Services spokesperson said after a rigorous review, they have concluded that investment in Moderna's H5N1 mRNA vaccine for bird flu is not scientifically or ethically justifiable. Moderna's CEO says the company will explore alternative paths forward for that program. So, yeah. There's a hiker back from the dead, alive and well after an emergency call.
What?
Happened over the holiday weekend in the Adirondacks when two New York hikers called and said they were lost and that their friend had died on a trail. The first ranger to show up quickly found the two were actually tripping on psychedelic mushrooms. Their friend also called the rangers and was found alive and uninjured. He'd just gotten separated from his friend.
I'm sorry.
All's well that ends well. It's okay. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Oh,
Mark is with me drinking the tea today.
Yeah,
only because
I'm
he's
under the
sick.
weather, so I'm drinking the tea, but it's still the magical experience.
So I drink that tea, sick or not sick, every day, and I love it.
They have all kinds of floral teas and different kinds of chai tea, the ginger tea, the vanilla tea.
English breakfast tea. The vanilla is my
Mango.
favorite. Mango
with a mango, baby.
They have a mango tea, a regular mango tea, and then they have a mango summer tea, which is like a giant tea bag that you can put and make sun tea, mango sun tea. And we did it last summer, and it's incredible. Really, really good. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. They've got coffee too. Whatever.
Yeah, I swear by their coffee, but Kim loves the tea. And all of the tasting notes on all of the different teas and coffees and spices, all there on the website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And look, it's a boutique setup. So that these things that are offered there on their website, all organic from women-owned farms, are chosen by Coachella Valley Coffee so carefully, so painstakingly. All of the coffee is hand roasted, and it's a fresh crop. For that reason, it's a little bit more expensive, so I want you to use that 10% off. Mark T at checkout, get you 10% off. And if you buy, what was it, the email that I got? Somebody was buying 2 pounds of it, and it's then even less expensive than Pete's with our discount. So there
Yeah.
are ways to make it even more cost effective. So definitely use our discount Mark T at checkout. 10% off. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Oh my God.
Oh, girl, baby girl, don't even play.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
I misspoke.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
That's not fake. That's real.
You just don't get it, do you? You don't.
You get nothing.
Seriously, what the
I love it when you're angry.
Can you let him finish, sir? They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
There's never been anything like this.
Girl, you just rude.
Who is having that conversation?
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Where are my weed smokers at?
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
It's fantastic. Right on, everybody, right on. Thursdays are special, and I have always loved them. But today, I was craving my time with our next guest. Such a brilliant legal analyst across the English-speaking world. You've heard him on London radio, across Australian and New Zealand television, and then in this country, of course, on Fox News Channel, on News Nation, and on television stations across the country. He visits with us on Thursday for the greatest legal analysis in the land. He is the great David Katz. Hi,
Great
David.
to be with you, Mark, Kim.
Wow, David. Huge ruling, and maybe you can help break it down for us. These tariffs, when they were first imposed and announced, they seemed so draconian, so immense in their scope, that it seemed outside of the president's purview and power to impose them. And we talked a little bit about that it was really upon Congress to grant the president the power for it. Otherwise, it would be something that Congress would have to grant him this emergency status that he wanted, that the country was under, in order to take hold with these tariffs. You pointed out at the time that you thought this would be legally problematic, and now here we are with a court, and then now a second court. You can perhaps review the specifics on that, saying, yeah, Mr. Trump, you can't do this. The president doesn't have this power.
Well, legally problematic in the sense that it would be a problem for Trump because it didn't seem like it was something that was within his presidential authority. It seemed there were so many things wrong with it. And I just have to digress for just 1 second and say, if we hadn't been beaten into a certain amount of disbelief, by the shock and awe campaign, I think it would have been easier for people to say, well, this one obviously is illegal. The courts will plainly knock this one down. But, we've experienced the presidential immunity decision, which has given, free reign for Trump to basically sell bribes from the White House lawn and at White House dinners. We've seen all of the results of that terrible ruling. We've seen the country trying to come to grips with the Dobbs ruling. And so people have lost so much confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court, and through our federal system of justice, which really is a pity because it basically works at the trial and appellate level. Well, here was an example where it absolutely worked at the appellate level, this level right under the U.S. Supreme Court, called the U.S. Court of International Trade, not a very well-known court except by people who practice in the tariff field. But, I back up my point by saying the market didn't go down, the Dow, from about 43,000 to about 37,000, except that people did not have confidence that the U.S. courts would hold on this issue. if the world of investors had had confidence in our courts and believed in our courts and our rule of law, they would have predicted this decision, because this decision was totally predictable. And let me just finish with my Katz. This decision will not be altered by the U.S. Supreme Court. People should go out and buy stocks. I'm not one of them buying them. I'm not touting because I'm selling or buying. But this one will stand. The president does not have this power. And we can go through all of the things that were wrong with Trump's attempt to abrogate this power of Congress and to claim there was an emergency when there absolutely was not an emergency. So let's get into the weeds, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say this, because you seem to have such great confidence that his concierge SCOTUS will not serve up the decision that he wants. I mean, he's certainly expecting that SCOTUS is a group of, certainly his appointees, a group of people that owe him something. But you're saying even they will not stoop to overruling this.
You look at all the right wingers, all the people who didn't come to bat against the Dobbs decision, breaking precedent after 50 years and imperiling women's right to choose all over the nation. They didn't come to bat really in a meaningful way, even under presidential immunity, which was shocking to me, because to me that was a monstrosity on our Constitution that you would expect conservatives, true judicial conservatives, to stand up for. But this one, you look at the commentary on it. Just give an example. I saw Forbes on Forbes Business Network saying that this was awful and terrible. And you see those kinds of conservatives, because, the conservatives always are affiliated with business. Business needs predictability. Yes, they want low taxes. They want low regulations, but they really want predictability. And this was, just from a business point of view, a disaster for business, because you couldn't plan ahead. One thing that's worth pointing out is it does not expressly cover, I'm not sure it at all covers, automobiles and steel. So, Trump trying to play the dominant animal and trying to show that, no, you can't land a blow on me. He may really do crazy things about automobiles and steel. And you can punish the European Union, if not with tariffs per se. Maybe he can punish them, and I expect he'll try to punish them with tariffs and restrictions on autos and steel. You can hit back at a lot of big countries that you're hitting back at with tariffs, and now you can't do it with tariffs alone as the president. He can try to hit back at some of them, many of them, with steel and autos. So we have to see on that score. But this case.
Wait. No, but I do have a follow-up then. You're saying that he can specifically target tariffs, but what the ruling was that he didn't have the right to impose these sweeping tariffs? I'm unclear on this.
There's a specific provision that gives the president power over automobiles and steel.
I see. Okay.
That wasn't on the chopping block or up for approval with this decision. This one was, to get into it, basically, Trump tried to use a law from the Carter administration back from 77 to deal with very different kinds of real emergencies. Remember, we had the petroleum, the gasoline lines. We had those kinds of shocks to our system in 73, and I think it was 70 in the late 70s. And so this seemed like a good idea at the time to give the president some kind of emergency powers in a true emergency, like one of those oil shocks. Well, among the other things that this court just said unanimously, including with a Trump, a Reagan, and an Obama appointee on it, this 3-judge court just ruled unanimously that there is no emergency. We've had trade imbalance for decades, and saying, oh my God, I can't believe we have a trade imbalance, there's an emergency. That's just junk. That's just a lie. And Trump managed to perpetrate that lie. And you might wonder, well, where were the Republican senators? All kidding aside, where were the Republican senators on something that the courts just think is complete garbage, just a complete non-starter? And yet he disturbed the whole world economy. Where were the senators? And I'm sure that the Republican senators would turn around to you, Mark, if they tell you honestly, and they'd say, we knew it was garbage. We knew there was no legal basis for it, but we figured, the courts would set it aside and we wouldn't need to risk our seats in Congress over it. And boy, is that a craven, cowardly view of legislators, even for people who are cynical about them, that they knew that this was a terrible thing that was pushing down the stock market, that was imperiling international trade all over the world with all of our allies as well as with our adversaries, and yet they did nothing about it. I don't think there was one Republican senator. They tried to do something about Canada. Remember that, saying that it was going too far with Canada, and I think they did get 4 votes of Republican senators only for that, and then the House tabled it, until I guess until they lose the House.
Well, the senators and Congress people are scared, David. I mean, it's just straight up scared. They're scared politically, and they're also scared for their stochastic terrorism of violence, stochastic violence, or one-off violence. There are I think real legit fears. We heard it from Mitt Romney. We heard it from Liz Cheney, and I mean, in any case, and judges. That's the other thing.
Mark,
Judges are, he's calling out judges specifically as well.
Can we get to that? Because the judges have actually decided they have something called the Judicial Conference. And, one of the horribles that we've paraded out there in commentary is to say, why are they so sure that the U.S. Marshal Service, which protects the judges, but which works under the Department of Justice, so this is Pam Bondi, rides herd over the U.S. Marshal Service that protects our judges. The judges have had that dawn on them, too, at the Judicial Conference. And they're trying to figure out ways to maybe remove the U.S. Marshal Service from the Department of Justice. But, they're not a legislative body. They're the judges. So I think there's actually a lot that they can do. And, of course, the marshals are incredibly loyal to the federal judges that, they also look at the calendar and they see, the federal judge has life tenure. The federal judge is going to be here in 3.5 years when Trump won't be. But the good news is that they have, this idea that, the federal marshal service just wouldn't show up to protect a judge. That's such a nightmare. If anything close to that happened, a judge were attacked and the marshal service, basically stepped down, didn't do anything. That would really resonate, I think, with just about everybody and be seen as a disaster that even a Pat Bondi couldn't countenance. But it's good to know that without that horrible, the judges are very well protected. They have, if necessary, people who sit on their houses to protect them. They have funds if they need them for their protection. There's ways that they can protect their families. And so the federal judges really and truly should not be intimidated, because if we ever have an intimidated judiciary, we have no rule of law. Then we really are in the territory of Mexico. We really are in the territory of the worst third world countries. But we don't have that in America. People should recognize that we don't have that in America, that all these federal judges are very, very well protected as things stand.
Well, the judicial system in America really is what has produced economic prosperity, political prosperity. I mean, it's created the success of the republic has really been in large measure because of our judicial system, free from a lot of the corruption. I mean, historically, right, David, that has been problematic across Latin America, across Eastern European nations historically. Anyway,
and Mark,
and I see that all imperiled. That's why I mentioned that. Go ahead.
Mark, please don't leave out that it also produced the best job this 27-year-old David Katz ever had in Washington, D.C. And, it's an interesting system, just to digress for 30 seconds, that, we don't have career law clerks in this country. And people might say, well, why not? Why not have career law clerks? They do in many countries, and that's what you do. You go to school, you learn how to be a law clerk, and you become a law clerk for a judge, let's say in Europe. And those are great countries, and they have great systems. But, there's some wonderful thing about the American system. They take these kids who've done really well in law school and have really good recommendations, and they say, no, come and be my law clerk for, a year. It's either a year and a half, or 2 years. The judges know what they're doing. They know how to judge, but they want that fresh blood and that energy to come on to their judicial service. So I think that's really an interesting thing about our system. There are some career clerks more, and there are more in the state system, but the federal system has worked just fine. And the law clerks who work for the U.S. Supreme Court justices, there are usually about 4 of them. So 9 justices, about 35 or so law clerks. Normally, they've had 1 year that they did what I did. They clerked for a federal judge. And then there's a pipeline of the really top appellate judges. I worked for a great trial court judge, but there's a pipeline from the top appellate judges who are called feeders to the Supreme Court. And that's who go to work for the Supreme Court. But to get back to our topic, I'd be happy to tell you why I think the U.S. Supreme Court will not take this appeal.
Please, and then I want to get to pardons and the most recent pardons. So go ahead.
Well, so this case is so fascinating. There's two groups of plaintiffs in this case before the U.S. International Court of Trade. Some are the states saying that you're going to disrupt our economy completely, like California says we're the fourth or fifth biggest economy in the world. We, California, all by ourselves, are the fourth or fifth biggest economy in the world. And you, the federal president, without having the right to do so, are about to destroy our economy. If you don't believe me, go down to the port right now, LA, San Pedro, and you'll see only about half the ships are arriving that used to arrive. That all these guys, many of them probably voted for Trump, are out of work. All the guys who drive the trucks, all the stevedores, longshoremen, longshore women, they're all out of work, and all the ripple effects of that. So California's suffering. I think that they're going to have standing. I think they're going to be fine. But here's the great group of plaintiffs who have standing. You have the wine merchants, and the guy says, I sell a bottle of wine that is imported from France or Spain, and I sell it for $50. You're going to put a $10 tariff on it. You're going to make my wine cost $55. And there are people who are not going to buy a bottle of wine for $55 who would have bought it at $50. And if you put a 40% tariff on, you're going to price my wine completely out of the market. And I am being hurt by an illegal tariff, a tariff imposed by a president who has no right to impose it. So they're great. And it seems to be that they win outright without a doubt about it in the U.S. Supreme Court. So just very, very briefly, what's wrong with it, Mark? What's wrong with it is that Congress has this power. Everyone said that from the beginning. The president does not have a power except in an extreme emergency, which this is not. Number two, this is not an emergency because we've had a trade imbalance for decades and decades, and there's nothing new about it. It's like Trump walking in there like in Casablanca. I'm shocked to see there's a trade imbalance. And oh, by the way, it's an emergency. Emergency is something that emerges. This has happened for decades and decades. But you'll love this irony of it. You remember the major case doctrine that you and I sat here and talked about when it came to the environment? All of a sudden, there's a major case doctrine. And unless Congress in a major case really specifies how this enforcement's going to work, maybe the enforcement's no good. Maybe when the inspector goes on the boat and says you're fishing too much, maybe they didn't make it clear enough that and that's a major thing, affecting environmental things at fishing. And so therefore you have this major case doctrine. Well, they turned it right on its head, this court, and said, if there were ever a major case, this ain't fishing. This is the entire state of the economy. It affects us all over the world. It affects so many products that come into the United States. If there's going to be something that major by Congress, if in 1977 they meant to have this result, they had to make it clearer than they made it, because at best for Trump, it's ambiguous. Ambiguous goes against the president. It goes against the regulatory agency. Congress has to make it very clear, or the president and the regulatory agents can't do it. Turnabout is fair play, Mr. Trump. And so and there's like 4 or 5 other reasons why this is no good. And by the way, they issued a stay, but it's only for about 10 days. And an appeal from this court goes straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there's no way that they can really delay it. The tariffs go into effect. And this idea that maybe Trump won't enforce it, the idea that Trump has to enforce this because Customs has to enforce this. Customs cannot be collecting tariffs because Trump ignores it, sits on the sidelines. You got to have a schedule to collect tariffs. This is like huge corporations. They're paying these tariffs every single day. You can't collect them in this context. And so the idea of defying this order, not obeying this court order, things that are always worrisome. If you don't believe me, ask Abrego Garcia sitting there still abroad with an order from the U.S. Supreme Court that Trump has to facilitate his return. But Trump cannot win by defying this one. So I think what Trump will do is he'll go really hard on autos and steel, and that'll be the next case that goes up. It may go right back to the same court of international trade. And remember, it was unanimous, including the Trump pick on that court, endorsed all of these arguments. I mean, they lost on everything. Trump lost on everything. He lost 7 different ways to Sunday. And that's why the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to give him any kind of relief. They're going to
think the auto and steel cases that you say will likely follow will also follow the same path?
I'm not certain they're going to go to that same court because they're under a different statute. But I think they're going to go to that same court. If they don't go to that same court, the court, it's just very, very clear that he's overstepping his bounds, but I
So you
haven't
think that they're
analyzed.
regardless of what court they end up in, David, not to press the point, but just that they will likely end up also being reversed, the steel
Yes,
and
but
auto tariffs.
he can create a huge amount of havoc, and the steel and auto industry are areas where Trump could create a lot of recession. He can really hurt our economy and other countries' economies, because you have to plan so far ahead with an automobile and how you're going to sell it, market it. Is it going to be electric? Is it going to be this or that or the other thing? And so there's a long lead time, and so Trump can screw up the lead time, but eventually all the tariffs have to go through Congress. This is like Civics 101. This matter is left to the Congress. The president's not a king. And what we've seen is this display of a wannabe king. He does it for the attention. He does it for the sheer outrage of it. And it's exactly what the framers of the Constitution said. A chief executive in America is a president and not a king. This
But
is
as
a
you
decision
said,
that
I
has
mean,
to be made by Congress. This is
but Congress
Oh, wait,
didn't.
One last thing: if Congress wanted to do this, they could probably impose these tariffs, because that would get past the major case doctrine. It would get past the separation of powers. But believe me, Mark, Congress does not want to do this, and it would be a law that would be subject to the filibuster. So there's no way in the world that 60 U.S. senators want to do this. They'd have to, all these Republican senators would have to take the rap. They've managed to not vote for any of this stuff, to stand by. Oh, really? And they haven't even passed an intention of the Senate, which says we don't agree with what Trump is doing. I think they were confident, number one, the courts would do exactly what the courts have done, and they do it pretty overwhelmingly and fairly promptly, and that they would endure the disruption to the stock market and to trade, because these Republicans didn't want to imperil their own seats.
All right. That's the tariff situation broken down well by David Katz. The other thing that the administration is doing, among a number of things, we'll get to, as I say, the pardons in a second, but he's targeting law firms that he doesn't like. And he has forced the capitulation of a few of these law firms to do pro bono work to the tune of $50 million worth of pro bono work. And one of his executive orders targeting law firms that he doesn't like was struck down by a U.S. district judge in the District of Columbia. He called the order unconstitutional. It was a 73-page opinion, and his opinion included 26 exclamation marks plus some language that I thought, was pretty notable. He says, the order shouts through a bullhorn, if you take on causes disfavored by President Trump, you will be punished. So I'm curious, David, and this is interesting because, as I was saying, some of these law firms have already sort of pre-surrendered. The threat of the president saying, for example, you won't be allowed into a government office, you won't be allowed into a government building if you're from a law firm that has taken on any cases that disfavor my administration, that were involved in anything prosecuting the J6 cases. There was a lot around the J6 perpetrators that was associated with this. In any case, some of these law firms have pre-surrendered, I would say. I'm wondering if now the judge here in the District of Columbia is sort of the sign that these executive orders involving these law firms, they also would likely be ruled unconstitutional.
Well, Mark, I'm going to be known as a name dropper on your show, but I can't help but having met and known the people that I've met in my long career as a practicing attorney. So I know this Judge Richard Leon really well. He's a charming, brilliant guy, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he's written an opinion that's a little bit in the Trump style. Like maybe Trump will get it if I write it with exclamation points and with really short sentences. But it's in line with all the other decisions. There are now 3 decisions. Everyone ruled for the law firm. And, these law firm decisions are complicated. The law firms are absolutely right to get upset about them. I've said this before. Every single one of these law firms is a victim. The perpetrator, there's Richard. The perpetrator is Trump. He's the perp here. He's the bad guy here. And all of these law firms, from the ones who were tempted to capitulate, from the ones who did capitulate, to the ones who stood up to him, they're all victims. because never in American history has an executive done this to law firms. The rule of law is that you have independent judges who decide cases correctly under the facts of the law, and you have independent lawyers who bring cases before independent judges, and they do it without fear or favor. They don't lie to courts. That's why some of those lawyers like Giuliani got in a lot of trouble, because they lied to courts. But they don't lie to courts. They present the best view that they can under the facts and the law to courts. And the idea that they're going to be discriminated against by the president in this way is truly an outrage. Now, stepping back from it, there's so much that's reputational with law firms. These law firms are not like 2 or 3 people. They're 1,000 people. So why does a certain firm have a certain brand? And they're very aware of their brand, and they're very aware of how their brand either attracts or doesn't attract certain kinds of business. There have been law firms the whole time I've been a lawyer that have been associated with the Republicans or associated with the Democrats. I told you I used to work for a law firm in Washington at the time was the biggest one in the early 80s, Arnold and Porter, still around, still associated with the Democrats. We represented Big Tobacco. And Big Tobacco didn't want to have sin taxes. So even though it was a Republican, it was Reagan who was in office when I worked for Arnold and Porter, we had a lot of interaction with the Reagan administration, because we said, look, you guys are trying to cut taxes. You need to get revenue from somewhere. Don't get it from the sin taxes. Don't get it from taxing cigarettes. At that time, Philip Morris also owned Miller Beer. So don't get it from taxing cigarettes and liquor. It's very regressive. And we made that argument. We made it all over the place. And we were greeted with open arms by the Reagan administration, even though we were Democrats, because we were bringing an argument to the table that rational people, rational Republicans would want to consider before they did whatever they did. So I know things have gotten awfully polarized, but I think some of these law firms capitulated because they wanted to capitulate. They wanted to say, especially the 10 hugest law firms in America, none of which effectively fought. I think the 10 hugest firms they make $5 to $10 million per partner, and they want to keep making $5 to $10 million per partner. They didn't mind the idea that they were being considered Trumpy. It was like, yes, be Trumpy. And when you bring me the merger that has $100 million in legal fees, yes, we want that merger to be brought to us that has $100 million in fees. Look at what Paramount is going through right now with CBS. And so you want to be the law firm that the client thinks will have some sway, some influence with the Trump administration. And so there are firms that want to be Trump. When they say they capitulated and they did $50 million worth of pro bono work, which is supposedly for veterans, I'm playing the violin, because if they get a $200 million piece of business from the Trump administration that they wouldn't have gotten, and they charge $200 million in legal fees that they wouldn't have otherwise had that piece of business, the $50 million in pro bono, just the cost of doing that high-flying legal business.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, in its own way. I mean, money rules the day. I want to quickly get to the pardons. He's been handing out pardons fairly aggressively, and they are, I would say, questionable, given the fact that there have been fraud has been decided upon by jury cases, and the most recent, I guess, he's doing it so far. There's one that he just handed out 17 minutes ago. So but I'm most concerned with. Or most interested in what happens in some of these cases, like the Chrisleys. They're the reality TV couple. They were found guilty of defrauding banks and the U.S. government for tax crimes. They were given 12-year sentences, and now they are going to be released and fully pardoned. And we're talking about defrauding the banks of $30 million, and so the substantial restitution that they had to pay is also something that I was interested in. So they get the pardon. What happens to the restitution money? Is that returned to them?
Yes, the restitution money is returned to them because it's part of the criminal judgment. Now, sometimes they bring a civil action, and remember, pardons don't knock out civil actions. So if someone is ordered to pay even $100 million in a civil case, that's not covered by the pardon power. But yes, Trump can, and he has knocked out very huge amounts of restitution. I think Jimmy Kimmel took out a little notebook on his show last night, and he said, okay, $7 million in fraud. This is the one whose mommy got him the pardon.
Right.
So he takes his little
That's,
notebook.
so just to be clear, you're watching. That's not the people you're seeing now are the reality stars. That's not the case that David's talking about. David's talking about the case of a guy who's serving. It was that was also taxes, wasn't it?
Yes, and I'm a criminal tax defense attorney, so I have so many thoughts. They're bursting out of my head. I can't even stay on the one that you have up on your screen.
No,
But
that's
anyway,
okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let's talk about the one who's mommy. So mommy offers like $200,000. Mommy's going to pay this money to Trump. $200,000.
No, she gave $1 million. It was $1 million.
The bribe starts at $200,000.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry. Take me through the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
That just fell out of Trump's hands. Like, no. 200 used to be something, but now I got the presidential immunity.
Yeah, I don't get out of bed for 200,000, right?
By
Exactly.
Roberts and the gang. I really can. This is an official act granting a pardon. I can sell them right in front of the White House on the lawn. And Roberts and his Supreme Court allies said, that's great. That's the presidential immunity. I'm committing an official act right here. Maybe Trump can't say, I'm selling you the pardon in exchange for your son getting out. Did you all hear me? Did you record that? I'm selling. And even if he said that, he'd turn around and say it was a joke, right? He'd say, yes, it's a quid pro quo. And then later on, he'd say that it was a joke. So he basically can sell these pardons. That's what he's doing. He's selling these pardons. You know, in third world countries, they don't do it out in the open like this. This thing's like the only country in the world where we have a president. I mean, it's disgraceful. It's unbelievable. We have such a great reputation in the world. We're so exceptional. Imagine if this were happening in any other country in the world and people were forming their impression of the United States based on, we have a president right now who's selling pardons in the White House. So anyway, $200,000 is not enough, but she ponies up $1 million. And after she ponies up the $1 million, this kid gets a pardon. So this fraud's supposed to be around $6 million. The restitution's supposed to be over $4 million. And he has to pay his family pays $1 million for the pardon. So Jimmy Kimmel has the thing where, well, he's either, depending how you calculate, he's $3.5 million or he's $5.5 million ahead of the game. And, you know, I have a client right now, and the allegation is that in 3 years, back in 08 through 10, that he underpaid $900,000 to the IRS. That's, of course, ballooned now into over $2 million since all of those years ago. He's being prosecuted for willfully not paying that money. The irony is if he had a pardon, right, he wouldn't even be under a legal obligation to pay money. But he's being prosecuted criminally. They want to put him in federal prison for not paying, willfully not paying, for spending the money on other things and not paying his tax debt. They want to put him in prison for that. If you know all the facts of that case, I'm sure a lot of people would be very sympathetic. But the reality is you can sell some of these criminal cases, and they're selling not so much. That guy is beyond belief. That guy owns some kind of a medical center, Mark, and he doesn't pay the pension contribution for the nurses and the doctors and the janitors who work at his medical facilities. Okay, so he takes the risk that they'll have no pension, that after all those years of nursing or swabbing the floors or whatever at his medical center, there'll be no pension for them. Why? Because he's taken the pension fund and spent it on a $2 million yacht. That is the guy right now whose mommy got him the pardon for the $1 million. This other one, the problem with them is that they're celebrities, Mark. And we talked about this before with celebrities, and someone whose judgment I treasure, who I appreciate, told me, oh, I like that show. Those people are getting railroaded. It's like, no, because you like that show doesn't mean those people are getting railroaded. That couple right there, okay? And this is not disputed. They took, what is it, $30 million from banks by not saying, Mark, you and I cannot get together and say that your show produces $30 million a year, and therefore we're more than able to pay back $30 million. And so a bank should give us $30 million, and the bank gives us $30 million, and our application is completely false, full of like statements under oath, under penalty of perjury, because we don't have a $30 million business. They just gave us $30 million after squandering all this money on their lifestyle. My understanding is that this fellow who's shown right here, he went bankrupt. That's also a crime. You can't get, that's an additional count, Mark. So here's I actually have a prescription for these terrible pardons, okay? I have a solution, and I haven't read about it in a lot of places. You can kind of infer it, but we have to bring in the future the state on board these federal cases. Almost all these people, Mark, have pleaded guilty. which means that they would have pleaded guilty to additional terms if the federal government had insisted on them. The federal government, and I did this when I was a prosecutor, I was the head of a major joint task force, and we brought the state involved along with federal investigators. And we tried to produce state charges. It wasn't so much about pardons, it was because we got great work out of the state participants, okay? But it's the remedy to pardons. And the thing is, if the Democrats don't want to play the same game, they'll never play it as notoriously as Trump does, or as almost cartoon-like as Trump does. But if they don't want to be able to give out pardons themselves as readily, then here's what you do. All these should be joint task forces. So when this fellow didn't pay his federal taxes and he looted the pension fund, he also violated state law, Mark. When these people committed the crimes that they committed, that they just got a pardon for, they also broke state law. And as part of the federal plea agreement, they should tell them you have to also agree to the state charges. We had the state on this case. There are companion state charges. You get a concurrent sentence, which means every day you serve federally, you're also serving state. But guess what? If you get a pardon, you're still left with that same
with the state. That's brilliant. That's actually a brilliant fix. Yeah.
And I've lost my mind. This happened with Manafort. We all talked about Paul Manafort. How was he able to keep those brownstones in New York City and so much of the loot after Trump gave him, I think he gave him a commutation and then he gave him a pardon. He should have been on state charges. When he defrauded federal banks, he was also breaking state law. You can't take money from banks and only face federal charges. It's a state crime to make false statements and to loot state banks. And we could solve a lot of those problems because, again, these people didn't go to trial and like beat the state charges, but get convicted on the federal charges. Almost all these people had plea agreements, and the feds could have added to the plea agreement, let's say Manafort, with these two people that you're talking about right now, with the guy with the mommy and the $1 million. Those people could have been required to plead guilty to state charges. And then I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, okay, Mr. Katz, so they would have had to bribe two people. But yes, they would have had to bribe two people. They would have had to bribe a future president, and they would have had to bribe a governor somewhere.
That's right. The governor would have to.
That's a lot harder.
Yeah.
That's a lot harder because I don't think they would get Newsom. I don't think that they would get the governor of New York. I don't think they would get, you go state by state.
Sure,
and yes,
that's a brilliant fix.
Could they find some venal governor somewhere? Yes, maybe they'd find a venal governor, but a lot harder. And you know what? At some point you say it's just too hard. It's too hard. By the time you pony up the money and you find a president like Trump in the future, and then you have to also go to the governor, just serve your time. And, the mommy's boy, he might have served his time because I think it was a year or two. These people got 12 years.
No, it was serious time they were looking at. Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, David, I've got breaking news that is not, necessarily something you might anticipate. And of course, because nothing sticks to Donald Trump, it's good Donald Trump news. There is an appeals court now that is allowing Trump to continue to collect tariffs under the emergency powers law for now. A federal appeals court allowing President Trump to continue to collect tariffs under an emergency powers law for now, as his administration appeals an order striking down the bulk of his signature set of economic policies.
Is that the same court in New York City, or did he run to a different?
I'm looking to see who the court was. Kim, do you see who the court was or where the court was? I'm seeing a federal judge.
Yeah, it is the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Ordered that both sides provide written arguments on the question of blocking Trump's tariffs to be filed by early next month. But at this point, they have paused last night's ruling from the Court of International Trade that blocked most of Trump's tariffs.
Well, Kim, we talked about the fact that, that 10 days, that there's this interesting 10 days that are about to, I think the Court of International Trade talked about within 10 days. And obviously, if you try to tomorrow not collect tariffs that you are collecting today, that would be extremely disruptive. So it may be that there's irreparable harm to the government, that they just can't stop collecting those taxes that fast. And so the ruling is that during this interim period, they can continue, that is, customs and the government can continue to collect tariffs. But that ruling seems to me, that if you look at what's the world going to be like in a month, I think in a month, the world's going to be that these tariffs are not in effect. There'll only be ones on steel and autos. But yes, during the next 10 days, there should be a lot of bouncing around, and the government may yet be able to collect the tariffs because they just can't stop. They can't mechanically stop.
Let me ask you now, in closing, about the money. So let's assume, as sort of been gamed out, as you've suggested, these tariffs are ruled invalid, illegal, unconstitutional. There has been money paid. There have been tariffs imposed. There have been import taxes paid. What happens to that money?
Well, I guess some people who paid a lot of it will try to claw it back if the law is favorable for them. But
they'd have to sue for it, probably, is the point.
Yeah, they'd have to sue for it. They try to get it, and they might have other things that offset a lot of it. But yes, some of them would come out getting their money back. But I think the big thing is that, we'll still have the power to impose tariffs. Nothing changed. Congress can impose tariffs. They can impose a different rate on different countries. They can use one product and not another. But it's Congress.
Sure.
Article 1 is Congress. We set up Congress in this country. Everybody doesn't like other people's Congress members, but that's okay. We have a Congress. It represents the people. It has its defects. Yes, the small states have too much power, especially in the Senate, but it's Congress. It's not one person. We got rid of a king when we had a revolution, and we didn't want King George. We don't want King Donald. So it has to go through Congress, and Congress can act on tariffs. I think it's still covered by the filibuster. But yes, if you're some country that just dumps stuff in the United States and you think, ha, 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 now I never have to pay a tariff. No, that's not true. And there are these anti-dumping laws. So if you're doing these trade manipulations, those are still against the law. And there's still a World Trade Organization that has power that affects like our trade, let's say, between the United States and China. So, Trump tried to come in. My own opinion is it was a way for him to extort money. And also to get a huge amount of press, because the market had to react and the media had to react when he did something like, say, he was going to impose 145% tariff on Chinese goods. What were they going to do? Not cover it? What was he going to not be the center of the news? But I think this is all great. This is all great for the rule of law, for American jurisprudence. The people who said that we were too optimistic, you look at these cases. I know they screwed some things up. Absolutely, they screwed some things up. Some are kind of going to be hard to repair. But basically, the onslaught of Trump, I think, has been held off by our courts, which have been fantastic, by the media, which has largely stood firm. Sure, there are some Trumpy outlets. And yeah, maybe they've held a few punches on the legacy media. But the country's still here. The First Amendment's still here. The law firms are here. The Congress is here. The courts, thank God, the federal courts are here.
Well, as usual, you're optimistic, and I'll let you sit with that optimism, everyone, because, as you know, I have a grim outlook toward everything, and another day when we have more time, I will counter David's optimism, but you are certainly, when it comes to the law, without peer, so I wouldn't begin to try to do it in
What do you think of this? Pollyanna and the grim marker.
Oh, David, you're wonderful. All right. Listen, thank you for all your time. You're so generous with it. There's so much going on. I left out a lot of the immigration stuff. We'll have to get to it next week. But thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to next time, David. Thank you.
Great to be with you, Mark.
David Katz, everybody. Bravo, 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 bravo. Wow. I'm
The Mark Thompson Show.
I know the clock on the wall is saying it's late. Abrogate is a ding word, says Tom. Yes, you're right. Abrogate is a ding word. And you're right. Abrogate was early in the conversation. Where can I purchase a Katsadamus meme coin? You're the best professor. Keep doing California proud.
Yeah,
keep
UC
doing
Berkeley.
Cal proud. He's talking about Cal Berkeley. Yeah, there you go.
Cal grad. There you go.
Cal grad. Well, thank you, Luis, for the $5 super chat. There is the Katsadamus caricature. James, test 2. Yeah, thank you, James. Right on. Luis says, Mark, I work for the government. Can I turn in my county-issued Prius for a McLaren 720 supercar? I'm sure my employers would be fine with it. Sure, why not? Yeah, that's an idea.
Here's the first test.
I see.
James is testing us out with $2.
All right, thank you, James. Thank you for the test and the second test. Louis says, yes, things were terrible. Our credit rating was higher. Stock market was up. But when talking about how things were, Trump, in response to the taco questions, when I got here, things were, to think about where we were, things were terrible. I don't do a Trump impression, so I just do like a general New York mobster kind of thing.
Things were terrible. Our credit rating was higher. Stock market was up. Less chance of recession. Yeah, only a graduate of Trump University would embrace this take. Yeah, it's you really do need a delusional recollection to think that we were worse off. Spencer Jaffe, this tariff mess might cause a recession. Yeah, well, if it continues unabated, yeah, I think that's a real threat. Excuse me, I have to cough.
Wes with a $5 super sticker. Thank you, Wes. Always coming through. Wes, an OG of the show.
Yeah.
And then we have Trevor with the taco.
Trevor Starr in Hollywood with the $10 super chat. Taco equals Trump always chickens out. Milk equals Mark is likable, kinda.
What? Aww.
Wow, it's true. Feeling very kinda. Yeah. So
Another test.
I do regret that we must say goodbye, but we must. Tomorrow, we'll be visited by the award-winning Jim Avila. Michael Shore should stop through. Kim will be here. Albert will be here. I will be here. It is something I'm grateful for, the support of this audience, the growth of this show. Thank you, everybody who's made good things happen. I want to thank, I was going to thank Theraflu for, I feel like I'm going to go, cough my lungs out right now, but the cough is actually much better. Yeah, it seems to be breaking down a little bit here at the end. The After Party Live is a show that Kim does. She does over another channel called the After Party Live channel.
I'll write it and we'll do it live.
And so go check that out. Until tomorrow, the great Shadow Stevens.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all of your wondrous support. We're out of time until tomorrow. Bye-bye.